So I'll request Dr. Elora to please introduce Dr. Danya.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hitesh. Hello, everyone. Very good morning to all of you. Today we are in the second day of faculty development program, and I'm Dr. Alora, host of this particular session, that is session 4, which is based on reliability of satellite precipitation products in hydrologic modeling, and the talk will be delivered by Dr. Dania. So let me introduce Dr. Dania to all of you. Dr. Dania is presently working as an associate professor in the Department of Civil Engineering, Institute of Technology, Delhi. Her research area involves hydroclimatology, hydrologic extremes, water resources management, land surface modeling, etc. Now, coming to her achievements, the achievement list is really long, and therefore I'm only highlighting of the very special and very specific events. Due to her extraordinary research work at this very young age, she has received NASI Young Scientist Platinum Jubilee Award in the 2017. Further, she has also received IEI Young Engineer Award, then Young Associate of Indian Academy of Sciences. Besides, due to her interesting and extraordinary doctoral research work, she has received Professor N.S. Govinda Rao Gold Medal for her Gold Medal in her PhD, and her thesis was awarded as Best PhD Thesis in the Department of Civil Engineering, IISc, Bangalore. At present, she serves as the editor of Journal of Earth System Dynamics by EGU, and also she works as an associate editor of Journal of Earth System Science, SADMA. With this brief introduction, I would like to welcome Dr. Dania to our program, and it is our immense pleasure to have her with us. Now I request Dr. Dania to take over the forum and deliver her talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pati, for the generous introduction. And good morning, everyone. Am I properly audible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am. I
Let
have
me
this.
share the screen.
Yeah, please.
Is the PPT visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Good morning once again. So we are going to look into the topic of reliability of satellite precipitation products and its application in hydrological modeling with a focus on water resources management. So the way we are going to deal with this talk is that we will start from the very basics. We will look into the precipitation measurements, the gauge measurements, the gauges available all over the country. And we will look into also the major satellite precipitation missions being widely used across the world. And when it comes to the satellite precipitation mission, we will slowly slip to the error associated, inherent errors associated in these missions, in these satellite products, and then how to deal with that, starting from the very traditional way of dealing with the errors, and the more advanced research topics, research advancements in that, and slowly going to what are the things we need to take care when we apply these satellite precipitation products, so-called SPPs, in hydrological modeling. So starting from the very basic, as all of us know that precipitation is expressed in terms of the depth of the water measured in for a particular duration. It can be for an event, that means the precipitation accumulated for an event. It can be for even 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or hourly precipitation or daily precipitation. So duration may differ, but it is essentially measured as the accumulated depth over for a particular duration. And then these particular precipitation can be measured using so-called rain gauges, which is the traditional method, traditional way to, let me highlight this one also. Yeah. So traditional way to respond is this using these rain gauges, and then we have the radars being installed by mainly by IMD. Here also IMD Delhi, there is a big radar which to measure the rainfall happening over the whole of NCT Delhi, and then there are satellites. So these are the mainly three methods to measure the precipitation. So there is a problem with the slide. Please excuse me for that. Yeah. So now let's have a look at the number of rain gauges available over India. So this is mainly maintained by the India Meteorological Department, IMD. We have around 6,955 rain gauges spread all over the country, and this particular figure explains gives you an idea about the spread of these rain gauges across the country. And this rain gauges data now it is really made available by IMD. It's a 0.225 degree by 0.25 degree of rain gauge data, and over some 120 years, starting from 1901 to 2020. And this rain gauge data released by IMD, it's the finest resolution rain gauge data available over the country. And the spatial variation, this data is able to capture the orographic influences and the spatial pattern of the rainfall happening across the country. I am somehow unable to, yeah. Are you able to see the annotation here, the marking here?
Yes, madam, it is visible.
Yeah. So then going ahead, in addition to this IMD data, there are two other rain gauge data sets available over India. Earlier, when this IMD data was not made available freely, we often use these two data. One is the Aphrodite data and the other is the CPC data. Aphrodite data is nothing but the Asian precipitation highly resolved observational data integration towards evaluation of water resources. It is developed by Japan and Meteorological Research Institute of Japan Meteorological Agency, that is JAXA, and it is available at a resolution of again 0.25, and then there is a climate prediction center data which is actually available for the whole of Asia, the whole of the world, but then there is separate data set for the east of Asia going through some special interpolation technique and interpolation objectives. I will show the details of these two data sets in the next slide, but your attention is driven to this particular the rain gauge density over India. For example, Aphrodite has a fairly good rain gauge density over India, whereas CPC the rain gauge density is very less. So now let us see the properties of the resolution of this data. While IMD is available at 0.25 resolution, Aphrodite is also available at 0.25 resolution. CPC is available at a very coarse resolution. And as you can see, the rain gauges available for IMD dataset is much higher, and the rain gauges which is available for Aphrodite dataset, it is for the whole of Asia, so it is like 5,000 to 12,000. But you can see that the number of rain gauges available over Indian region must be much smaller than the rain gauges available for IMD dataset. And CPC, as you can see, there is only a very few rain gauges available. So the main difference is between these data set is the number of rain gauge which is available for the creation of this data set, along with the interpolation technique, and where the IMD use Shepard interpolation, which is based on the inverse distance weighted interpolation, and Aphrodite uses share map interpolation, which is based on angular distribution method, and then there is an optimal interpolation technique. And also the interpolation objective also differs for all these the gauge data sets. That is daily precipitation, and there is some objective like this for Aphrodite, and the CPC there is daily precipitation divided by climatology. This is the objective they are basing this interpolation of. And now going ahead, so let us have a look at these gauge-based precipitation data sets and how much they are differing. Do they even differ? So we had done a very brief study about this, the assessment of all these the gauge-based precipitation data sets, and the study was published in 2017. And we found that this IMD, Aphrodite, and CPC, which are again, I am repeating, the gauge-based data set, they are able to successfully capture the spatial pattern of monsoonal rainfall over India. But then there is a huge difference in the magnitude of rainfall. For example, if you take the mean monsoon rainfall, that what IMD is giving, that is highly underestimated by Aphrodite and CPC. So they exhibit a very high dry bias over the Indian region, and which results in the underestimation of even the extreme rainfall. But to our surprise, dry and wet spell characteristics from Aphrodite and IMD show large difference. Even though Aphrodite, as I have shown earlier, use a lot many rain gauges, even though there is a large difference between Aphrodite and IMD in this dry and wet spell characteristics. So for example, you can focus your attention on this figure, first figure. This explains to you the number of wet days, and the red one is the Aphrodite, the blue one is the CPC, and the black one is the IMD. You can see that surprisingly CPC and IMD are closely following each other, whereas Aphrodite with a larger number of gauge station is actually differing much from the IMD. And then the second figure explains to you the number of wet spells. Spell means the number of days, consecutive days with rainfall. So there also CPC and IMD are sticking to each other, whereas Aphrodite is actually having a very high dry bias. Dry bias means underestimation. And also we estimated the number of extreme wet spells in the third figure. Extreme wet spells means the number of consecutive days with extreme rainfall events. For example, more than 90 percentile or 95 percentile rainfall event. There also there probably CPC is also not behaving not in agreement with IMD, and also Aphrodite also. But the conclusion we got is that Aphrodite and CPC are able to capture the spatial pattern well and fine. But then when it comes to the magnitude, both are underestimating the IMD rainfall, especially during the monsoon season when rainfall is dominant. And CPC effectively could somehow capture the dry and wet spell characteristics and closely resembles IMD, even with a small number of rain gauges in it. And both CPC and Aphrodite significantly suppress the extreme wet spell events. So when it comes to the extreme wet spell events, or when it comes to flood simulations, these two data sets, the trust on these data sets should be cross-checked. So this is the gist of this. Now with this gauge-based data sets, this much difference or disagreement in the gauge-based data set, let's also have a look at the number of rain gauges. So this is an interesting study done by Kidd and others in 2017. So what they did is they took out the GTS rain gauges and GPCC rain gauges. They measured the orifice of those rain gauges, the number of rain gauges, and the orifice area of GTS gauges is this, and the orifice area of GPCP gauge is this. And then they compare to the total number of gauges, total number of GTS gauges and total number of GPCB gauges. The area is represented like these squares. So if this is the representative area of those gauges, and what they did is they try to compare that with the usual soccer pitch or football ground. So this is only just one ground. So they finally come out with the conclusion that the total area measured globally by all the currently available rain gauges is surprisingly small and equivalent to less than half a football field or soccer pitch. So this explains the sparsity of the rain gauges across the world. Of course, this study have only accounted the GTS gauges and GPCP gauges. They have not accounted the IMD gauges or any other country-based gauges. But having said so, this study explains and highlights the sparsity of rain gauges all over the world. And this brings to our attention that somehow we have to look for an alternative to get a fair idea about the spatially and temporally continuous data set of rainfall. So that is that is why we are often stuck to these satellites, that is precipitation measurement from space. So satellite measurement, the assurance is that they can cover a large area and continuously in a short time. So the spatio-temporal continuity of the data set is assured from these measurements. But it's not that all rosy, because it comes with a lot many inherent errors and then associated with a lot many disadvantages. I will explain that in the subsequent slides. So this satellite measurement is normally done by a combination of active and passive remote sensing techniques. This is the kind of, so for example, this is this animation I have shown is for from the TRMM. I will explain what TRMM is and all later. So this is from a satellite, and this is for the rainfall pattern, how it varies overall over the globe for all the months. So if you focus your attention over India, you can see that over the June, July, and September, at least towards the southern peninsular region, we are getting high amount of rainfall. So this figure assures you that at least the spatial pattern of the rainfall might be better captured by these satellite products. But let's see the finer details. Now, let me explain a bit about these satellite precipitation products and how it measures. I'm not going into the details of this because this is of interest to the core remote sensing person, and we are the one who are applying these one. So we are more interested into the product which come out from this, and then the error associated with that product, how to remove that. But let me also give a glimpse about all these things, how it is measured. So basically, and precipitation is measured, as I said, it is a combination of active and passive remote sensing techniques. And then there are three kinds of sensors often you can find in any satellite. There are visible and infrared spaceborne sensors. So something like this, for example, visible and infrared, the visible range and infrared range. So it reflects the cloud top radiance. Here you can see. So the visible probably will be able to detect the visible and infrared will be reflecting the cloud top radiance, and the satellites actually measure the so-called brightness temperature. So this how you can get an idea about this height of this cloud. That is what is shown in this figure. For example, this is a cloud with a very low height and low depth, and this one has a very high depth, right? So then that means the second one probably may result into much more heavier precipitation. So then the reflectance, you can see that the blue lines there, here the blue lines. So the reflectance, there will be a difference because this is getting reflected at this level and this one is getting reflected at this level. So there is a difference in the reflectance, and that is measured by the satellite. And I repeat, satellite actually measure the brightness temperature and through this reflectance. And then there is a lot many algorithms running in the background, so-called retrieval algorithms, filtration algorithms and all, which relates these properties, and finally we get the precipitation product or any other product which is given by the satellite. So this is the working of this visible and infrared sensors. And then we come to the microwave sensors. Microwave sensors have much more ability, and they penetrate they can penetrate this particular clouds. So we can expect that the accuracy or the efficiency of this microwave sensor should be much higher than the visible and infrared sensors. So as you can see, these microwave sensors would be able to capture the radiative signatures of even the precipitation particles. So if you have crystals here and droplets here, then also there will be a change in the reflectivity, and that how to convert or translate those differences into the precipitation magnitude, that comes after that, as I mentioned, through the retrieval algorithms and the filtration algorithms. So these are the first two sensors, and then there is another one called precipitation radar, which is much more effective than the previous two, which actually gives you a three-dimensional structure of rainfall. We all are well aware of the precipitation column, that is precipitable water, which we have studied in basic hydrology. So this precipitation radar is capable of giving the information of the whole of the precipitation column at a very height. So this one, this particular column information, that can be taken out from the precipitation radar. So precipitation radar is mainly used. So while this visible infrared and microwave radar sensors may serve the purpose for measurement of tropical rains, where rainfall events are relatively high, but you know that over temperate regions, the rainfall events are often light. So then to get an accurate measurement of that, usually precipitation radars are the one to be trusted on that. So it can fairly, this PR or precipitation radar can fairly detect these rainfall rates down to about 0.7 millimeter per hour, but this is an approximate value. The idea is that it can measure even fairly light rainfall rates, and this is something which we can see in the latest satellite mission. I'll explain that. So moving ahead, before we see what are the missions we use frequently, satellite precipitation missions we use frequently, this is some brief idea about how these SPPs work. As I mentioned, they measure the raw data which is coming to the satellite is in the form of a brightness, temperature, or in the form of a reflectivity. So finally, what we are using is the core remote sensing person may look into all these levels of data, but the application, that means the hydrologists and water resources engineers, will be interested in mainly the level 3 data. So the level 0 data is the raw instrument data, or the raw instrument data which is taken, which is actually coming to the satellite. And level 1 data, these two data is with some corrections. Corrections means they reference the data, geo-reference the data, and apply some radiometric corrections and all. So this is of interest to any core remote sensing person. And the level 2 data, they use the level 1 data, and they used to derive these geophysical parameters. Geophysical parameters means precipitation in our case. So the level 1 data, which is georeference, will be passed through some retrieval algorithms. For example, brightness, temperature, if it is the raw data taken by the satellite, then there will be some algorithms, machine learning or any other algorithms running in the background to relate that to the ground precipitation. So we need to have ground observations, and then they relate with these algorithms, and then they finally derive these geophysical parameters. But then level 2 data will be of the same resolution of the data what the satellite is receiving. And then level 2 data will be converted into a gridded form, and many interpolation algorithms and resampling algorithms will be applied to this level 2 data to get the level 3 data. So finally, what we are using, the hydrologists are using, is the level 3 data, which is in the gridded form, and it is the form of much more continuous form. Spatially and temporally continuous data is the one we would be using, and our attention is on this level 3 data. So you will see that later in the GRMM and all, the level 3 data also after converting that to level 3, then also it goes through a number of processing algorithms. I'll explain briefly about that. So now I'm going to explain mainly two missions here, two widely used missions, satellite precipitation mission here. The first one is TRMM. TRMM is nothing but the tropical rainfall measuring mission. So it was actually a research satellite, designed to improve our understanding about this precipitation dynamics and all within the tropics. And it is a joint mission by JAXA, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and then NASA. And then there is something called CRL, which is now called as National Institute of Information and Communication Technology. So all these three organizations came together and launched this TRMM. We call that as TRIM. So it is mainly for, as the name implies, it is mainly for the tropical rainfall measurement. So it covers the tropical and a bit of the subtropical regions also. The coverage is from 35° north to 35° south. And this is the coverage of the GRMM data, 35° north to 35° south. And the mission is mainly, the aim of this mission is, as I mentioned, it is mainly to measure the tropical rainfall. As we know that most of the time, the rainfall, the heavy rainfall is focused on this, or is concentrated on this particular region. So that is why, first of all, when they developed a mission, they focused on this tropical rainfall. And then these are the details of this mission. So mainly, as I mentioned, we would be focusing on these third level 3 products. So and two types of level 3 products are there: TRMM 3B42RT and TRMM 3B42. Here 3 applies to third level 3, and here RT applies to the real time. So whatever data you are getting from the level 2 after applying these resampling and interpolation technique, that in real time, if you are getting, that is what is called TRMM 3B42 real time. So that means the latency means the time taken to get the data once the satellite receives the raw data. So even though it is called as a real-time data, you can see that it is going to be available to us only after 7 to 8 hours, and the resolution of the data is 0.25 by 0.25 degree, and it is available at a temporal resolution of 3 hourly. And this data set, stream data set, is available from 1998 till 2016. When it comes to this TRMM 3B42, we apply this, they take this TRMM real-time data and they use some of the gauge data, that is observed data in the ground, and they do some gauge adjustment like this using the GPCP gauge product. That is Global Precipitation Climatology Project. They have some gauges installed all across the world. They use the information of those gauges and adjust this data through some sort of algorithms, and that is this 3B42 is a gauge adjusted data. So of course, when we compare these two data sets, we expect that TRMM 3B42 should be able to capture the spatial patterns and should be able to capture the precipitation characteristics in a much more finer way than than the real-time data. That is, of course, we can expect that, but we will see how the performance of these two products in the latest slides. So mainly, this TRMM discontinued. They decommissioned this TRMM in the November 2015 or so. But then after that also it keep on giving data. But I think finally the data set, the duration of the data set of TRMM is available from 1998 to 2016. And then they replaced this TRIM mission with something called the GPM mission, that is Global Precipitation Mission, GPM mission. Global Precipitation Mission is an international network of satellites to provide the next generation of global observations of rain and snow. So here, what they did is there is a concept called a core satellite, and then there are many satellite constellations which is surrounding this core satellite, and this core satellite receives information from these constellations, and then the core satellite processes this information to finally give us the precipitation product. And of course, since it is called as a global precipitation mission, you can see that the coverage is also going to be much higher, larger than when compared to TRMM. And this launch date is on February 27, 2014, and the data we start receiving from 2015 onwards. So here, this is the coverage of GPM, Global Precipitation Mission. As you can see, it covers almost the whole of the world. But to give you a hint here, when we talk about bias, the bias, of course, over this particular region is probably going to be much more because of the interpolation and the way the satellite looks at that region. Probably, most probably going to be much more. But then our focus will be in this particular presentation will be over India. So moving ahead. So GPM Core Observatory, as I mentioned, is an extension of TRMM, and it is there is one constellation called Megatropics, which is an initiative of our ISRO that is also a part of this GPM Core GPM Observatory. So it's an extension of TRMM, and the focus was mainly to TRMM focus on heavy to moderate rain, and GPM focus on not only heavy to moderate rain but also the light rain, so that it is applicable to the temperate regions also. So the light rain, the solid precipitation, and the microphysical properties of precipitated particles, all these are focus of GPM, and GPM is expected to give all this information fairly accurately all across the world. So so GPM has an active and passive microwave instrument and also a precipitation radar. I'm not going into the details of those instruments. So mainly coming into the data, precipitation products supplied by GPM. GPM, it's called iMerge product. iMerge E, that means early, iMerge late, L, late run, and iMerge F, final run. So these are the three products GPM gives depending upon the processing. So iMerge early run means it is like the TRMM real time. It takes only, the latency is 4 hours. Within 4 hours, we get the data. And late run means it again goes through some other processes like the forward and the backward propagation algorithm to minimize the error, and that takes around 14 hours for us to get. And then there is a final run, same as the TRMM 3B42, where gauge adjustment using GPCC gauge products are done, and that actually takes 3.5 months to release the final product. So the resolution of all these products, these are all our third level products. So the spatial resolution is 0.1 degree to 0.1 degree, and this is at 5 hourly precipitation, temporal resolution. Now, this is just about the satellite precipitation products available and the resolution at which they are going to be available. But our interest and the focus of this topic is to how to handle the error inherent in these SPPs or satellite precipitation product. So as we know that gauge-based products, the gauge-based observation, we know that it measures the precipitation directly falling on the surface. And satellite-based precipitation observations, as I mentioned, that it actually captures these brightness, temperature, or reflectivity through some sensors, and then there is a lot many algorithms in between, and finally it gives these geophysical parameters, or rather here precipitation. So this one, the cloud or the thermal radiance, is the raw observation probably, and then the satellite-based precipitation estimates are the final products. In between, there are a lot of empirical or physical-based transfer retrieval techniques. So the errors can be found, or the source of errors can be multiple in these particular SPPs. So it could be from the error in the raw observation. It could be from the way these particular retrieval techniques are done. It could be also from, if you're using a gauge-based corrected product, then it could be also from the observation errors of the gauge. So the sources of errors are plenty, and finally, whatever products we are using, before using the products blindly into into any hydrological model, we have to have a fair idea about the error inherent in that product. So satellites, since these are indirect precipitation estimates, that is always associated with a bias and error. And gauge-based observation also will have some observational error, but normally in most of the studies we tend to neglect that. We can fairly assume that observational errors are going to be minimum. But here the bias and error cannot be neglected. And what is the difference between these two terms, bias and error? Often you will find that these two terms are treated as synonyms. But if in real sense, in strict sense, if you see, bias is often an average quantity of an error. Error is the one-to-one difference between the measurements. And if you are interested in the average of that particular characteristic, that is often be called as bias. So if you strictly want to differentiate, this is going to be the difference. So as I mentioned, this error or bias is introduced as different stages of precipitation measurement. So I'm going to give you some references along this PPT. Whomever interested can go through these references to get a fair idea about all these topics. But this particular presentation, due to the time constraint, I'm not going into the details of many of these details, which would be probably interesting to you. So the increased validation of SPPs, ground-based observations, all these things many studies have taken up, and these studies are fairly common since the 2 decades. Starting from 2000 onwards, many of these studies are very frequent. You will find many studies. So the errors in SPPs, I try to list out the errors, but this is only a very brief list. So cloud top reflectance, the very raw measurement could induce some error. And then the background emissivity. Background emissivity means that there is a reflectance from the cloud top we are trusting on. But then there will be reflectance or emissivity from other substances and also from the cloud itself, right? So that will also count to the reflectance, but whereas that is not the actual reflectance. And then there is the retrieval algorithm, the effectiveness or the accuracy of those retrieval algorithms, sensor measurements. And then the fifth one accounts for spatial and temporal sampling, how finer resolution the satellite swath can pass and where all it is missing, like that. And then there is calibration of data. So these are the main sources of errors in any SPPs. And when it comes to the errors, mainly we can classify these errors into two, that is retrieval errors and sampling errors. So the retrieval errors are mainly the intrinsic errors, inherent errors in the remote sensing measurement, probably due to the cloud drop reflectance or the whatever data which is getting to the satellite. And the sampling errors are mainly due to the lack of coverage by the satellite. That means spatial coverage might be constrained over some portions there to finally arrive at the level 3 product. As I mentioned, we will be using some resampling or interpolation algorithm. So the error induced into the product because of the lack of coverage by the satellite, that is what is called sampling errors. And the quantification of errors, as I mentioned, all these errors, retrieval errors and sampling errors, are at most important before we apply these techniques into these products to the any hydrological modeling. So let us have a look into what error, how much error actually is contained in these products. We first started with our experiment with this TRMM data set, and this is a brief idea about that. So TRMM, as you can see, let's concentrate on this JJAS region. So TRMM 3B42 and 3B42 RT, that is real time. You can see that there is great underestimation, or this area is underestimation, and the blue represents overestimation. So you can see that at heavy rainfall regions, the TRMM is going to underestimate the rainfall value, and the RT product, the real-time product, when compared to the TRMM 3B42, which is gauge adjusted, as expected, will be having a very high error than the TRMM 3B42 product, right? This is expected. So the error in the RT product or real-time product, which actually would be the one we will be using if you are going for any flood forecasting or anything, and if you want to use SPPs, but the error associated with that RT product or real-time product is known to be very high. And so this kind of errors are inherent in the TRMM, and let's have a look at the annual cycle also. We have seen that, so here IMD is the black line, and TRMM 3B42 is the green line, and the red one is the RT product. So you can see that both these two products are able to capture the seasonal cycle fairly good, but then as you can see, if during the heavy rainfall or the monsoon months, it is highly underestimating the rainfall value. The same can be seen for the yearly distribution also in this figure. So yearly distribution also, much of the rainfall is overestimated by this. This one also is overestimated, and this one also is overestimated. So much of the rainfall is overestimated by this rainfall by these two products. But this doesn't mean that they are overestimating the extreme values also. Overall, the values they are overestimating, but the extreme value, if you have a look, those extreme events are highly underrepresented. So probably I will show that in a later slide. So, but the bottom line is that there is a great amount of disagreement between the gauge product and the TRMM or the satellite products, and the real-time product will differ much far. As you can see, the red line is always a deviation from the black line is always high. That means the real-time product is bound to have a larger error when compared to the gauge corrected product, which is expected. So the highlights here is that first is that these SPPs are unable to pick up these heavy events. So there is a presence of bias in the magnitude of even long-term averages. And second most important thing, if we are using these SPPs for any kind of flood forecasting is, this is the TRMM rainfall product. Rainfall for the Uttarakhand flood, which happened in 2013, which I have just given here for as an illustration. So this is the IMD data. As you can see that the blue ones are the areas where heavy precipitation happens, and this is the spatial pattern given by IMD. It's not that IMD is also foolproof; it has its own errors, but let's take it as the base now. And TRMM 3B42 gives this kind of spatial pattern, and TRMM 3B42 RT gives this kind of pattern. And remember, again, RT would be the one we would be using if you are using for any flood forecasting measures. So see here, RT gives the precipitation I here, whereas the IMD gives the precipitation I here and here. Now, any water resources or hydrologist can assume that what is the difference, what is the impact of this spatial incoherence is going to be when we run a hydrological model. So that spatial incoherence, that is inability to capture the eye of the heavy storm events, that is something which taunts all these satellite precipitation products, in addition to its inability to capture the magnitude of the extreme. So spatial pattern is also not well captured by the satellite precipitation products, and how to deal with all these errors. That is something we have to look into. So we need to quantify or validate or even do more than that to find out the error inherent in these SPPs. So the error, that technique is called error decomposition. That means decomposing the error in these data sets. So what we do in this error decomposition is that we disintegrate the total error into multiple independent error components. And why we disintegrate that into multiple independent error components? Because if we disintegrate that into these error components, we will have a fair idea about from where this error is actually coming. We can have that idea about. So that is why we decompose that into independent error components and then analyze that separately. So these error components can be analyzed to determine the strength and weakness of different data set, and also the plausible cause and stage of introduction in the retrieval process. So those kind of studies are also a plenty if you look into the literature. So moving ahead. So our focus is mainly on this one. So what are the different error decomposition in techniques in for these SPPs? So I'm going to explain mainly three methods here, which is widely used in the literature and the traditional methods. And then I will go into the advancements or the modifications we have done in our recent studies. So mainly this one is the hit, miss, fall precipitation error scheme, which is the most traditional one and which is widely used for probably last 1.5 decade. And then there is a systematic and random error precipitation scheme, and then there's a combination of these two. So let's see one by one. So hit, miss, fall error components, which is traditional approach. So here what they are doing is that, see here, this first figure explains you the it's a scatter plot of the reference rainfall and the satellite rainfall, RSAT and RREF. So you will get a scatter plot like this. Ideally, if satellite rainfall is good, then it should fall in this 45-degree line where RSAT is going to be equal to RF, but it is never going to happen. This will give you a scatter plot like this. Now we have to find out the error associated with that. So for that, we are going to divide this into three components, which is called hit, miss, and false error components. So what is this false error component? False error component is when satellite falsely detect the rainfall. So when actual rainfall is not happening, but satellite is saying that see, there is a rainfall there with some magnitude. So that means satellite is detecting rainfall. So that means it is going to fall. All these points are going to fall in the y-axis, and that is what is called false precipitation, and we denote that by F. And then there is the missed precipitation in this third one. So missed precipitation means actually rainfall is happening on the ground, but satellite has missed that event. So that means all these points are going to lie on the x-axis. And then there is hit precipitation. Hit precipitation means it is actually treated as a success. That means when the rainfall is happening in the ground and satellite has also detected the rainfall value, but there might be some disagreement between the magnitudes of these two values. So this means the hit bias will lie anywhere here, anywhere in the domain. But the hit error is defined as RSAT minus RF, the difference between the satellite value and the reference value or the observation value. So these are the three components in which the first method defines hit, miss, and false error components. Then further, we divide this into the second method explains how to find out more information from these error components. So this method is actually developed way back in 1981 and been used in the numerical weather prediction models. That is then inducted into this satellite bias correction method in some 2010 or 9 or so. What it does is that, for example, this is the again this one is RSAT value and this is the RF value. So if you plot these two values, then we will get a the scatter plot like this. And ideally, all these values should lie in the 45-degree line if RSAT is equal to RF. And what it does is, if we can fit a line. So I'm going to explain the systematic and random error decomposition scheme using the additive model. So for example, this points of course will deviate from the 45-degree line, but can be fitted through a linear line. That means relating RSAT and RF. So RSAT is equal to, or rather R star SAT is equal to A plus B into RF. So that means A is the intercept here, B is the slope, and which is RF is the independent variable, and R star SAT is the value which is getting from this particular regression fit or linear regression fit. And now with this value, for example, if I am, let me erase this. So if I am going to, if I am going to consider this particular point, that means the particular point, this is the RSAT value, and ideally our observation value should be this one. So ideally the RSAT value should be this one, and this is the R observation or R reference. So the error is going to be this much. That means RSAT minus RREF. Right, this is the error, and we are going to break this error into two parts, which is by using the linear regression just we have done. For example, the R sat value, R star sat value is this one. So the difference between R star sat and the RREF, that is sort of a constant value, or that has more stability. So because we are able to fit a regression line along with that. So this particular error, we call that as systematic error, and the rest of the error we call that as random error. So this is how it is done. So now if you can disintegrate this total error into a rather systematic error and random error, this is the equation. So RSAT minus RREF, the whole square divided by n, the whole of that, that is the total mean square error, and which is divided into systematic error and the random error. And so this is R star sat minus RREF, which is a systematic error. As I mentioned, this error, even though it is an error, if we can systematically express that, even if the error is small, since it is actually can be deduced through a linear fit, it can be removed through some well-established bias correction algorithm, right? So that is what we are measuring. So ideally, even if the systematic error is more, we have the confidence that we can remove that from the using some bias correction algorithm. But the random error, probably it is very hard to remove. So the random error should be as minimum as possible. Even though again I am mentioning, even though the total mean square error of from a product is high, if the majority of that is for the systematic error, then we can probably remove that through any efficient bias correction algorithm. So in the second method, effectively the total error is divided into a systematic error and random error by fitting any linear regression like that. So this particular method is again expanded using a multiplicative model. In the previous slide, what I have mentioned is that it is the relationship between RSAT and RREF is through a linear regression. Here, the relationship between RSAT and RREF is through a multiplicative model. That is the only difference. So the relationship, instead of A plus B into RREF, the relationship is expressed in form of this one. RSAT is equal to A into RREF raised to B E raised to eta. So, and you know that if you're applying a logarithmic transformation both sides, it is essentially converting that into a linear form only. So in the x-axis, instead of RSAT, we have to draw log RSAT and RREF, and the y-axis, instead of RSAT, we have to write log RSAT. So, and then you will get a linear line, and the procedure which I have explained in the previous slide is going to be exactly same for this one also. So effectively here also total MSE, that is mean square error, is divided into systematic mean square error and the random mean square error. Multiplicative model is the one which is preferred nowadays, and it is proven to be more efficient than the linear fit which I have shown in the previous study. So in the later slides, when I explain the method we have developed, I will explain that using the multiplicative error model. But effectively that is, once we convert that into a logarithmic transformation, there also it is going to be a linear fit only, right? So third one is a mixed error decomposition scheme. Mixed error is the combination of first and second methods which I have explained. First method, if you remember, that breaks the total error into false precipitation, hit precipitation and misprecipitation. So in this one, the hit precipitation component is broken up into systematic error and the random error using a multiplicative model or using a linear regression model, as I have explained. So it's a combination of first and second methods, nothing else. Now, so these are the well-established error decomposition schemes which are available in the literature, and why we have to relook into those. What are the flaws in those? So flaws in the existing error decomposition scheme is that there are two major flaws we have identified. First is that let's have a good look at this hit error. So hit error, as I mentioned, ideally all these points should lie in this 45-degree line, right? Then hit error, the way it is defined is RSAT minus RRF. So any point above this 45-degree line, that means RSAT will be more than RF. Any point below this 45-degree line, RSAT will be lower than the RF point. But when we actually take this this hit error, that means RSAT minus RF, the first one would be give you a positive value, and the second one, where the point is below the 45-degree line, will give you a negative value. Now, when you calculate the hit bias, but that means the average of that or the sum of all these hit errors, what is happening is this will get cancelled out, right? So when you actually calculate the hit bias, which I have highlighted here in red, so there when you take the summation of all these things, it is going to get cancelled out, and that we can directly say that this scheme, if we are adopting, is certainly going to underestimate or underreport the hit bias. That is the first disadvantage which is going to be in this traditional scheme. Now let's have a look at the second disadvantage. For the second disadvantage, I am highlighting two cases here. Case 1, for example, as I mentioned, this is the 45-degree line, and say this best fit line, either it is through a linear or a multiplicative model. Best fit line, let's say it is actually lying in the above this 45-degree line, and the second case is that the best fit line is lying below this 45-degree line. So we are going to consider two cases here. So if in the first case, what is going to happen is that when we consider this 45-degree line, when we consider this best fit line which lies above this 45-degree line, and say we are focusing on a satellite data which that point is lying below this 45-degree line. So when this kind of situation arises, that means we are discussing a case where this best fit line is above the 45-degree line, and we are actually calculating the error for a satellite precipitation which is lying below the 45-degree line. The point is here, the satellite point is here, which I have marked using red now. Now the total error, as the way it is defined, is going to be the difference between the satellite product and the observed product. So total error is marked in that red arrow. So this is going to be this total error, right? This is only going to be the total error. But the way the total error is defined is the summation of the systematic error and the random error. Now systematic error is the error between the fit line and the 45-degree line or the observation value, that is given in the pink color. So this is going to be the systematic error, and then the random error is the difference between the fitted value and the satellite value, which is given in the as the green line. So ideally, the hit error, as per definition, it is going to be the sum of this systematic error and random error. And you can see that in this case, even the random error is much more higher than the actual error in the product. That means H is the actual error. Random error is much more higher than the actual error itself. I hope the message is clear. Now coming to the second case, when this linear fit line is lying below the 45-degree line, there also, if you consider a point which actually lies in the opposite side, that means above this 45-degree line, then the total error is given as the capital H as the black line here, and the systematic error, as I mentioned, it is the difference between that fitted line and the observed value, which is the pink one. See here also the random error is much more higher than the actual error. So when cases like these occur, the random error will get overestimated. So these are the two main flaws in these traditional decomposition techniques. That means hit bias is often underestimated, and the random error will get overestimated depending upon these two cases, the occurrence of these two cases. So when we identified these two errors, and now how can we overcome these errors, that is when this recent study came, an improved error decomposition technique. So in this one, the method is very simple, but I will show also the impact of this method. The impact of this method is going to be huge. So what we did is a very simple adjustment here. So as you know that the satellite one is going to be broken up into three parts: hit, miss, and false. So this is the false precipitation, this is the miss precipitation. We are not going to do anything for these two components. But when it comes to the hit error, as I mentioned, that hit error will tend to get underestimated. So what we did is we broke up into three components. That means one is overhit error, and then there is a true hit error, and then there is a underhit error. So overheat error is something when the accounting all the points which lie above this 45-degree line. Underheat is all the points where when the satellite precipitation is below the observed value. That means all the points will be lying below the 45-degree line. And when the true hit, that cannot be an error, but that is a true hit. That is that when the satellite precipitation is exactly matching the observed value, which rarely occurs for precipitation, right? And so the true here, the total error here is going to be equal to here OH minus UH. So there is always a negative sign associated with the UH, and also you can note that there is a negative sign associated with the miss events also, because there the satellite precipitation is going to be much less than the observed precipitation. So wherever satellite precipitation is lesser, and since by definition the error is defined as RSAT minus RF, so there is always a negative value associated with the missed one, and similarly there is a negative value associated with the UH also. That means underheat. So the total error is going to be OH minus UH plus true hit plus false minus M. And as I said, true hit is actually not an error if you satellite and reference value are the same, so it will always be 0. So the total error is going to be OH minus UH plus F minus M. Now this may appear as a very slight modification or simple modification, but I will see the impact. I will show you the impact of this. So OH and UH overcome the cancellation of H and over reporting of random error. That is what I am going to show next. So here this we have applied for TRMM, and I am showing you for both the products, TRMM the gauge corrected on the first panel and the real time in the second panel. So here the total bias is the first one here. Sorry, total bias is this one, these two figures, and the heat error will give you this one. That means 0.62 and 1.6, and overheat and underheat. When you differentiate that is going to give you, for example, heat error is actually showing you that more or less TRMM is going to give you a very good value, but then you can see that in the overheat, you can see that most of the regions where heat error is actually low, overheat is much more high, and underheat is also much more high. And then there is a missed precipitation here. Missed precipitation, false precipitation are going to be the same, right? So this is something which the extra information which can be extracted. So wherever this heat error, whatever information is suppressed by the heat error, that is revealed by this overheat and underheat error. So the overheat and underheat error over high rainfall receiving zones of Western Ghats and Northeast Asian, you can see that these errors are going to be high. So, so disintegration of this heat error into, or heat bias into OH and UH components are at most necessary. And this is another figure explaining that. For example, this is the yearly variation of this heat error and the variation of OH and UH respectively. For example, the heat error, the black line is almost touching 0 always. That means saying that TRMM might be very good. But if you see the blue and the red solid portions, you can see that OH and UH are always high. So when combined, OH and UH will get cancelled out and give a lesser magnitude of H. So the application of heat error for the comparison of data set or for the performance analysis of data set, SPPs, which has been carried out for since years, that may not be a right method to take it ahead. So moving ahead. So again, we also try to relate that with the rainfall magnitude. As you know, the error is going to be directly proportional to the magnitude of the rainfall. So here, what we did is that we try to relate these error components with the rainfall magnitude. So the magnitudes, the rainfall magnitudes are in the x-axis and the bias is in the y-axis. So the black line is the heat error. The green line is the true error. As you can see, heat error and true error also are directly inversely proportional to this rainfall magnitude. But you can see that a more linear relationship can be found with this underheat error, that is the red portion. So it is more or less linear, and the OH may not be, that means overheat may not be that much related to the rainfall magnitude, but underheat is directly proportional to this rainfall magnitude, and which gives us some hope that if we can find a relationship, then that can also be used for the removal of the bias very easily. So this is going to be the bottom line of this. So the bottom line is that the splitting of these hit error into OH and UH is at most necessary for the error decomposition. And now let's have a quick look at how these systematic and random errors are going to vary. There also, as I mentioned, the traditional method will overestimate the random error. So I'm not showing that one, but then I'm going to show you the overhit and underhit components. That means the total error is this one. And if you see, the total error is broken up into the systematic error and random error. Again, the first panel is for the gauge corrected product and second panel is for the RT product. You can see that for the overhit, if I'm splitting that into systematic and random error, you can focus on these particular values. These are the average values, the spatial average values. So 2.9 was the total error here. I hope it is visible to you. And systematic error is 2.2 and the random error is 0.67. Similarly, for the underhit also 2.3 was the total error and 1.6 is the systematic error and 0.67 is the random error. Of course, in the RT product, those error values are very high, which is much higher than the gauge corrected, which is expected. So the message here is that the contribution of systematic error is much greater than the random error, and that may help because, as I mentioned, systematic error can be removed relatively easily than compared to the random error. So this kind of splitting up into overhit and underhit error, we are putting focus on systematic error more and than on the random error part. So moving ahead, the takeaway from this particular exercise is that conventional approach of error decomposition often underestimate the magnitude of intensity error, basically the hit bias constant component, and the integration of the hit bias component into overhit and underhit errors overcomes the underestimation, and also it avoids the overestimation of the random error. So often the magnitude was observed to be higher than the hit bias. So the high magnitude of overhit and underhit was observed over few grids, showing zero and negligible small hit bias. So this is the takeaway points from this exercise. And I will quickly brush you through this expanded contingency table, which is closely associated with the work we have just discussed. But this contingency table, whatever I have explained here, that is the traditional contingency table, and the contingency tables are mainly used of interest to the data providers. When they get the satellite data, they often plot this contingency table, and contingency table, if it looks good, then they release the data. So the reference data set and the satellite data set, if in the reference data set an event is observed and satellite is the event is observed, then it is called a hit event. This is the definition we have already described. And in the reference data set, it is not, the event is not there, but the satellite is saying yes, there is an event, then it is called a false one. The reverse of this, that means in the reference there is no rain and the satellite says that there is no rain, and the reference it is a rain, so that is what is called a miss event. And then there is a null event when both the satellite and reference are observing no rainfall. So this is the contingency table often used, and if all these values are ticked, then the product is good to go. But let me show the defects in this one also. So here they use some sort of scores based on these hit, miss, false, and null events. So one is that probability of detection. Probability of detection is hit divided by hit plus miss. So this should be as high as possible. The probability of detection should be as high as possible. That means the ideal value is 1. Probability of miss, instead of h in the numerator, here it is m. And the probability of miss should be as less as possible. And then there is a false alarm ratio. That is, false alarm ratio should be 0. And then there is a critical success index, again h by h plus m plus f, and should be equal to 1. So I am going to focus on these 4 index, and then there are also scores which focus on the volumetric. That means the amount of rain. That is an extension of the first 4 indices I have explained. You can go through that. So with these 4 indices, I am going to show you 3 synthetically generated series and a reference series. So RF, that means the reference of rainfall, and then there are 3 series: RSAT1, RSAT2, and RSAT3. RSAT1 is created in such a way that it closely follows the observed series. You can see that it is superimposed over the black one, the red one. red one is superimposed over the black one. And then there is a blue one, which clearly, that is RSAT2, which clearly overestimates the RF. And then there is a green one, which clearly underestimates the RF. But if you actually use the traditional scores, which I have just explained, that means POD, POM, FAR, all these three series will be having the same score. POD will be 1 for all these three series, POM will be 0, FAR will be 0, and the critical success rate will be 1 for all these three series. So according to the traditional scores, all these three series are equally good. So there is no difference. So now how to counter that? So that is when we applied this again, the modification here in the contingency table. So the hit one, whatever we have discussed, is divided into overhit, true hit, and underhit. And we divided this POD into probability of over detection, probability of true detection, and probability of under detection. And the probability of over detection should be 0, probability of true detection should be 1. So this is my mistake. Probability of true detection should be 1, and the probability of under detection should be 0. Right. And the true success index, instead of the critical success index, we define the true success index, and that true success index should be equal to 1. Synthetically generated series I have shown in the previous slide. So these were the values for the traditional ones, and for if you are using the modified ones, then you can see that the over detection, the blue one clearly have an over detection, that is P, probability of over detection is 1, and the probability of under detection is 1 for the green one, that means RSAT3. And whereas for the first one, which closely resembles the observed one, that has a true detection value of 1, and also the true success index is also 1. So this table will give you the exact information about which series is good when compared to the other series, whereas the traditional method may give you all three series as equally good. That is the message here. And also we tried it on a different series or different synthetic series. Two series are there. Here also the black one is the observed one, and then there is the red one and the blue one. So from the traditional, we made this indices in such a, made this series in such a way that traditional method will give you the same values, 0.857, 0.87, 7.143 and so. But from this series, it is from these scores, it is not sure which series is good. So if you apply the modified method, you can see that POOD. So for the first one, the second one is a little bit overestimating when compared to the first one. The true detection is good for the red one, the first one, and the total success, the true success index is also a bit higher for the first one. So if as a user you want to pick any time series, you can go for this one, and you can pick up any the series with more POTD and more TSI, higher value of TSI. So that is the just message from this one. So here again the frequency based indices. So here you can see that this is a result of TRMM. That means POD and POM, FAR, CSA. The first panel gives you the traditional indices, and the second panel, this one gives you the modified indices. You can see that 0.63 is the POD, probability of detection of the TRMM. That is 63% of the events are detected. That is what it is claimed. But you can see that among this 63, 30% are getting overestimated, 23% are getting underestimated, and only 10% are truly detecting. That is the additional information which can be taken from this conditional modified contingency table. And also moving ahead, the same message is conveyed in the volumetric based indices also, while the traditional one says that more than 80% of the volume is accurately captured by TRMM. It says that in that 80%, 52 is overly estimated, 14% is underestimated, and only 13% is going to be truly estimated. Okay. So the takeaway point is that conventional contingency overlooked the variability within the magnitude of hit rainfall events, and the modified contingency table is proposed by expanding these hit events into overhit, true hit, and underhit events based on the intensity of detected events. And the true hit actually represents those events where the simulated and the satellite value exactly match. So in this course, we can focus on the TSI and the POTD. And modified contingency table provides an additional information beyond this conventional contingency table. So these are the two recent advancements in the area of contingency table and the error propagation or error decomposition. So once we get a fair idea about these error components, that means how much hit bias is there, and among that hit bias also how much is overhit, how much is underhit, how much is true hit, and also how much is false and how much is miss. Then our next step should be to identify a relatively good bias correction algorithm to remove the bias. Now, bias exists because there is always going to be a difference between the satellite value and the observed value. So this delta P, which I have shown, is going to be the bias between the satellite value and the reference value. And this bias need to be corrected through some bias correction algorithm. And finally, for the hydrological application, we will be focusing on this corrected rainfall value, corrected satellite rainfall value, right? So these methods train an empirical, this bias correction algorithm could be an empirical method, conceptual method, data-driven transfer functions, any method, depending upon the accuracy and the applicability of that method. So this is actually going to be a transfer function. This transfer function is then applied to SPPs for the correction. So let us see what are the different types of these bias correction methods being widely used or reported in the literature. Mostly this is done using a linear scaling, and then there is a local intensity scaling, and then there is a distribution or quantile mapping and Bayesian approach, similarity metrics, evolutionary algorithms, and even machine learning algorithms are being widely used for this bias correction. I will show you one technique which we applied recently. So this bias correction method, it is not just that relating the satellite precipitation with the observed precipitation and then there is a transfer function linking these two. Not that simple. Many studies have also tried to get the information from other hydrological variables like soil moisture. Soil moisture can be used, or elevation, topographical variables, temperature can be used. So all these information from all other variables can also be used and somehow incorporated through these algorithms so that the bias can be corrected in a relatively better way. So we can go through the references of these. There are many studies coming up in the recent years with added information from many topographical and also meteorological variables. So what we are proposing here is that, feeding the bias correction algorithm with pre-processed or decomposed rainfall instead of the direct rainfall value. We were basically interested in the how to pick up the extremes, how to correct the extremes in a much better way. So we thought that we can divide or decompose this satellite rainfall into many frequency segments and observed rainfall also into many frequency components. That is what is shown here. So these are the frequency components, or these are the frequency components of satellite rainfall, and the corresponding frequency components of satellite and the observed rainfall need to be compared and corrected. And similarly, this can be repeated for all the frequency components, and some bias correction algorithm can be applied for these frequency components independently. And once these frequency components are corrected, then these frequency components can be joined to get the finally corrected rainfall of satellite. So that is the technique we try to adopt, and the hypothesis is that the feeding the bias correction algorithm with pre-processed or decomposed rainfall series with defined frequencies instead of the direct rainfall may possibly improve its efficiency. So there are various ways to decompose this rainfall, by starting from the wavelet analysis to the Fourier transform, which everyone knows, and the single spectrum analysis. There's empirical mode decomposition, and then there is an improved one and simple empirical mode decomposition. And then there is a variational mode decomposition. So then in our study, we try to pick up this VMD, that is variable mode decomposition, because of the advantage that it is reportedly more robust to the sampling and noise, and sampling and noise are inherent in these satellite precipitation products and observation products also. So we try to pick up this algorithm, and this is more or less same as the Fourier transform. If you are familiar with that, we pass the sine and cosine curves, and the amplitude of the sine and cosine curves determines the frequency, dominant frequency over that. That is the basic idea of all these decomposition algorithms. So in this one, the VMD decomposes VMD decomposes a real valued input signal and into many intrinsic mode functions. That is what I have shown before. So those functions or the frequency, the varying frequency, there will be high frequency series, and there will be a very low frequency series, and then there will be a residual also. So I'm not going into the details of this. So there, the VMD basically decomposes a time series into many intrinsic mode function, and these different intrinsic mode functions represent different frequency. That is the gist of it. And when we use this VMD, you will get some figure like this. For example, the VMD decomposition, this is IMF1, IMF2, IMF3, and then there will be a residual. So you can see that this will be of varying frequency. So this is a high frequency one, and then as we go down, the frequency will be dampening, and finally there will be a very slow frequency signal. So similarly, we did the decomposition of observed rainfall also. Now we are going to compare the first IMF with the first IMF of satellite, the first IMF of observed rainfall. We have to correct the bias in that. Now for correcting the bias in that, we have used the ECDF, that is empirical cumulative distribution function matching technique. It's a very simple technique, and it is widely used for bias correction even in the climate projections also. What it does is that, for example, the observed distribution is the blue one, and the red one is the model distribution. You can see that if you take a percentile value or a quantile value, this is the value corresponding to the model distribution, whereas that particular one is represented by this value in the observed one. So, and the corresponding rainfall magnitude is this one. So here, for example, say the first one I have marked is say 20, and the observed one it is some 16 or 17. So we are actually correcting the correcting this CDF based on the quantiles. So a quantile of model distribution is replaced by a quantile of the observed distribution corresponding to the same probability. So we select a probability and then identify, for example, we select a probability like this and identify these two values corresponding to the observed precipitation and the satellite precipitation, and the satellite precipitation value is replaced by the observed precipitation value. That is a very simple method, which is the ECDF matching technique. So that is applied to correct the bias here and individually for all these IMFs. And finally, this bias corrected IMFs are getting, and then it is along with the residuals, and this is combined to get the corrected rainfall. Now this is a technique we have adopted, and let's see how much efficient it is. So the basic steps is that, as I mentioned, decompose the gauge-based rainfall using VMD and compute the IMFs. Similarly, decompose satellite rainfall into many IMFs, same number of IMFs, and then each of these IMFs and the residual component need to be corrected using the ECDF technique, and the corrected rainfall is obtained by adding all these corrected IMFs of the and the correct residual component. Now let's see what is the advantage or the how this method is performing. So the mean bias in raw and corrected IMERG datasets are given. So this particular method we have demonstrated, the applicability is demonstrated in the GPM products, that is IMERG product. So we have selected IMERG E early and IMERG L. So these panels are the raw product, and the error of this product with the IMD rainfall. So I am showing the error here, the spatial variation of the mean total bias. So you can see that IMERG early product, this is going to be the bias here. I am focusing again on the JJAS portion, JJAS duration. So there is a very dry bias over the Western Ghats and a wet bias over the central Indian portion. Same thing is happening with the late product, but since the late product is say which have a backward propagation, although it is expected to be much better than the early product. So you can see that little bit the bias is lesser when compared to the early product. And these panels, second panel is the bias corrected product of the early one, and the fourth panel is the bias corrected product of the late one. As you can see, after applying this method, the bias is is relatively reduced, and for the early one and for the late one also, which actually gives a good picture, but let us find out the details. So the mean bias for the testing period, earlier one was the training period and the testing period. Testing period also, if you compare, this was the bias earlier, and the bias is removed, and this was the bias earlier for the the late product, and the bias corrected product has very less bias. And similar message is conveyed in the RMSE also, but I'm skipping that. And now this is the spatial variation of mean total bias into the disintegrated components. That means overhit, underhit, and the true hit, right? True hit will not come here. So the total bias is something like this in the IMAG E. So we can probably focus on the, the figures written here. So here 0.84 was the total bias, and OH is 1.6 and UH is -1. Here after bias correction, you can see that the total bias is reduced to 0.17. So the values are the spatial average, I mentioned again. And OH is 1.1, so it got reduced from 1.6 to 1.1 after bias correction. And UH, you can see that it was -1, and it is more or less -1.1. It is slightly increased, but probably the same. And the late product 0.79 was the actual bias. It reduced to 0.12. The overhit was 1.6. Overhit, of course, has reduced to 1. Underhit is -1. Underhit is again -1.1. So what the message is giving is that after the bias correction, there is a reduction in the total bias, that is certain, and there is also a reduction in the overhit component, but probably not much improvement has happened for the underhit component, or rather there are some portions there is an increase also. So the miss and the false one will of course almost remain the same after the bias correction also. And this is for the testing period. Testing period also the same message is conveyed. So, and we also made a critical analysis on the extremes after the bias correction, how the extremes are being captured. So we took up some indices, and for example, this index is very wet precipitation. That means annual total precipitation when daily precipitation is greater than 95th percentile. And this is the number of heavy precipitation days. That means number of days in a year when precipitation is greater than 10 mm. And CDD is the consecutive dry days, and CWD is the consecutive wet days. So let's focus on these indices now, and let us see that what bias correction has done with these particular scores. So as you can see, this is the first panel is the IMD, and all other figures should match with the first panel. That is the visual comparison you can do. So for example, if you focus on this one, R95P, IMD, of course, this is the picture. We can expect high values in the Western Ghats and the Northeast region. And the IMERGE E, of course, have high error in the heavy rainfall region. And the bias corrected has, for example, let us again focus on the figures I have given. So here it is 647.2, and here it is 849. 849 is the error in IMERGE. Or not error, the total precipitation. That means R95, the spatial average of all those things. So 849, and there is a huge deviation with 647. I'm not sure whether the text, the figures are visible. I hope it is visible. And then once it is bias corrected, you can see that it is coming to 663, which is much more closer to the IMD. And similarly, in the IMERGE late product, it was 872. The deviation was high with the IMD, and after the bias correction it is reduced to 657. So there is a great improvement in the R95, that means the 95 percentile value, and also the same thing we have observed for the R10, that means the number of days with precipitation is greater than 10 mm. So it was 31 in IMD and 36 in the actual product, early product, and again coming back to 31 in the bias corrected product, and the same thing is observed for the late product also. But there is a take here that if you focus on these wet days, it was 13 for IMD and early product was 11, and after bias correction it is actually increasing. So that is one take here, and for the same net product also after bias correction it is increasing. But the next one, the dry days are corrected as I have shown earlier. So here this is again the same for testing period. So here the take is that the significant reduction in mean bias is observed post bias correction method, that is for sure. And the reduction in RMSE is also observed, but still there is a lot of RMSE still there in the figure, in the data set, which need to be corrected. The overheat component gets significantly reduced post bias correction. We have seen that. But the negative components, that means the underheat and the mist precipitation, are not much affected. Rather, it remained the same. It's not either increased or probably decreased. And the bias correction was able to correct the total wet day precipitation and the extreme wet day precipitation. That is good one. But then it was unable to correct the wet spell duration, and rather it introduced a additional bias. So all these splitting up of these characteristics are extremely important, because after this bias correction, what purpose you are going to use this corrected data set for? And if you are using this data set for like med spell duration and all, then probably this is not a good technique. So this kind of analysis are this is not a good product then. This kind of analysis are extremely what most needed before blindly probably using this data set, these SPPs into the hydrological model, which is often seen also. These SPPs are seen often directly inputting into the hydrological models and then getting the simulations. That should not be done. Rather, this kind of analysis should be done before that, and see that where these SPPs are behaving in a better way, where this what characters of SPPs are behaving in underestimated or overestimated. All these kind of analysis need to be done before inputting that into any hydrological model. So that was just about how we decompose the error in the satellite precipitation product and what all things we need to be taken care of, and then what kind of bias correction techniques you can apply probably in the literature, and there are some new advancements also. Now, once this bias corrected data is received, then we can input that into the hydrological models. Now, there comes the major thing. The error is always present in the FPPs. After bias correction also, there will be some error. That error, how it is propagating through these hydrological models. Propagating in the sense there is a runoff generation mechanism, and then there is a routing mechanism. So this error, how it is propagating, at some stages this error may get dampened, at some stages it may get accelerated, right? So these kind of things that need to be analyzed. So error in SPPs can potentially lead to high uncertainties also in the runoff estimation. So it is at most important to quantify these errors and the implications of it, and you have to before taking for the prediction of any other hydrological fluxes and states. This here there are two things. For data providers, those who are providing the data, they are mostly focused on the data and the error inherent in the retrieval algorithm. But for data users, we are data users, the error associated with the SPPs and the influence of this error, or rather the propagation of this error through our hydrological models, is rather interesting to us. So this, let us see that how to handle these errors. So there are well-defined methods, but then this is the area which is least explored in this particular topic. So I will just show a glimpse of the various different studies, a couple of studies which have done in this particular topic, but a lot need to be done after this also. So the quantification of error associated with this particular SPPs are at most important. So for example, this is an end-to-end error analysis framework given by Hong and others in 2006. So what they did is that precipitation products are there. This is the precipitation products, and it can be directly fed to the hydrological model, and then it can be given to support or decision making, where there is no uncertainty information given. And these precipitation products can be subjected to error quantification, and then it can be fed to a hydrological modeling with a partially uncertain, partial information of uncertainty, and then it can be used for decision maker. Then there is an ensemble error propagation, where different ensemble or surrogate data of satellite products are developed, And then all those data sets are fed to the hydrological model. That will give us a total uncertainty bound, and then it can be given to the decision making. So this is an end-to-end error analysis framework, which is very famous in this one. And so essentially all these things, they are trying to link up this propagation error into the runoff generation mechanism and the routing processes. So let us see which all studies. Before going to that, this particular topic, as I mentioned, is going to be much challenging, because the conclusions we are going to derive from these exercises is going to be sensitive to a lot many factors. It is going to be sensitive to the satellite rainfall product we are taking up. And it is going to be sensitive to the scale of the basin. That means the catchment area. And you will see that most of the studies, later on I will explain, only addresses this one, the scale of the basin. It is going to be sensitive to the spatio-temporal scale of the hydrological variable of interest. So for example, whether it is a 1 degree or it is a sub-basin based modeling, or a grid based modeling, something like that. And the level of complexity and the physical processes represented by the hydrological model, whether it is a lumped model or semi-distributed model or distributed model. And also the regional characteristics of the basin, like the terrain, the topography, the morphological characteristics, etc., etc. So all these factors, and then there are even more factors. So all these factors are going to influence the conclusions we are trying to come up with this task, how the error is going to propagate through the hydrological model. And that is the reason the studies in this direction are emerging, but so far there are many, but not much when compared to the error propagation or error decomposition studies, which I have explained earlier. So as an example, for example, but there is still hope in this one, because the observed and simulated hydrograph, this is using the TRMM real-time data, and this is done by Chiabetta in 2016. So the first figure explains you the discharge which is simulated, which is the green one is the discharge observed, and the black one is the simulated discharge through a hydrological model using TRMM real-time data. And as you can see, the peaks are not at all captured well by the, or it is getting underestimated highly by the model. But in this one, they have just fed the real-time data. There is no bias correction, no model recalibration. That means they have not recalibrated the model using the satellite data. Calibration is done with the observed data only. Now, after that, they recalibrated the data using the bias-corrected satellite product. Bias correction is done through a linear algorithm. And surprisingly, they got, the peaks were pretty much higher than the one earlier. So some reliability on this technique. So recalibration and the bias correction did improve the stream flow simulation. That is the conclusion they have arrived at. But then there are more studies which focused on how this error propagation, and which is of rather research interest. So I will show a couple of studies here. So here, the propagation of error from rainfall to runoff, what is the behavior it shows? So let us first understand what this is. So they have this study, that is Nikolopoulos in 2010. So they have defined the relative error or something like this. That means RREF is the satellite, RREF is observed, RSAT is the satellite, divided by RF. So sigma RF minus sigma RSAT, the difference between that, divided by the sigma RF, that they have defined as the relative error. So if we calculate the relative error in total rainfall, which is being fed to the model, and the relative error in the total runoff, which is coming out from the model, and if we plot a scatter plot, then they observed that they did it for two basins with different area. Our first basin is for 1,200 kilometers square, and second basin is a very small basin. So they observed that for the larger basin, a much more significant linear behavior between these two are observed. And for the smaller basin, again, the linear behavior is there, but the linearity can be questioned here. So here, the propagation of error from rainfall to runoff exhibits a linear behavior. Not only this study, many other studies have also reported, especially for larger scale basins. And also, they extended this one for many catchment area. This can be seen in the second figure. In the x-axis, it is a catchment area from minimum, for example, 100 to some 1400, and the y-axis, it is actually the ratio. That means the ratio of the relative error in total rainfall runoff and the relative error in total rainfall. So the relative error, the ratio should be actually equal to 1 if the error is translating to an equally to the from the rainfall to the runoff. So most of the time we can see that the error if for the smaller basin, it is actually below 1. That means the error in total runoff is a bit low when compared to the error in total rainfall. That means if the ratio is less than 1, we can say that the error is dampening out. And for the larger basin, as the catchment area increases, the ratio is actually going greater than 1. That means the error is getting magnified. That means the error in runoff is much more higher than the error is actually which is present in the rainfall. So somewhere the amplification or the magnification is happening in the hydrological model, and especially for the larger basins. So that was the message given by this study, and this was further extended by a 2013 study by Maggioni and others. But their definition for relative error was a bit different. That means a sigma comes out. That means sigma rsat minus rf divided by sigma rf. That was the definition. So let us focus on this figure and this figure. So what they finally conveyed is that as the catchment area increases, the error propagation factor. The error propagation factor is defined as stream flow relative bias divided by rainfall relative bias. The ratio of stream flow bias by divided by and rainfall bias. So that, if you see, that is increasing. So the stream flow, the relative bias across a range of basin scale that is shown almost doubles up when the catchment area is increased from around 1000 to 5000. And here the RMSE, which on the other hand is decreasing as the catchment area is increasing. So these kind of messages are given. So basically, if you are using this satellite precipitation product over a catchment, it is better to first go into this kind of propagation analysis and see the characteristics of the error, whether it is dampening out or magnifying, and which stage it is getting dampening out, which stage is getting magnified. All those information need to be done before using these products to the hydrological model. And this is yet another interesting study by me in 2016. So here also, they instead of trying that on the catchment area, that is scale of the basin, which has been the focus of attention for majority of studies in this direction, these guys focused on the characteristics of the hyetograph and the hydrograph. Hyetograph is the rainfall intensity versus time, and hydrograph is the discharge versus time. So the characteristics of that, the volumetric characteristics, the centroid of that, and also the shape of that. So if you see the first figure, this they have done for a rain flood and a flash flood. So let us first focus on the first box plot here. So in the x-axis, they have tried for two products, that is TRMM 3B42 and TRMM 3B42 after bias correction. And in the y-axis, they have plotted the error in volumetric parameter, that means runoff depth, propagation factor. And propagation factor is again the ratio of error metric in stream flow and error metric in rainfall. So that should be that if it is less than 1, then of course it is dampening out. So the error in these volumetric parameters, we can see that it is more or less fluctuating, close to 1. So the volumetric parameters did not show any significant change while propagating from rainfall to runoff, but the shape related parameters, that means the shape parameter, the centroid of these two, so that gets decreased. So the error on the shape related parameters show a general decrease here, that is always less than 1. So this is the centroid, and the second figure is the spreadness or the variance in these two, hydrograph and hydrograph. So that is also getting dampening out. So this was the shape information they had given when the TRMM is inputted to one hydrological model. And so conclusions are the reliable and of course the high spatiotemporal precipitation data we get from these satellites, that is for sure. But then, for that reason, SPPs are of course a reliable substitute for the traditional gauge-based observation. But then the message is that when we are using SPPs, we have to be at most careful, because these are indirect precipitation estimates, and they actually measure these cloud radiances. So first of all, we have to put a lot much effort to understand the sources of error through error decomposition, and also we have to bias correct those products. And as we have seen that conventional error decomposition methods suffer from some drawbacks, which we have addressed through some modified contingency table and some improvised bias correction technique. And also this bias correction technique, whatever we are choosing, should have the capability of dealing with the extremes. So that is the kind of critical assessment one has to do. And also the evaluating the error propagation SPPs, that we have seen that the error propagation, the tracking of that error is going to be very challenging, but it is actually going to be a necessary task before using these SPPs in hydrological modeling. So with this, I will conclude this talk. And there are a lot many references, but these are only a few references I try to list out. So if anyone is of interest to this topic, we can go through these particular references. So thank you for the patience, and I would be happy to take any questions, or if you have any suggestions, I'll be happy to listen to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the very interesting session and very informative, in fact. So now I ask the audience if they have any question, then they can put forward. Kindly allow unmute the audience, please. If the mic is not working for the audience, they can put the question, in the writing form. There's that we can also use those things. Please write in chat also. It will be easier to understand. The chat setting is muted. Can you please give the permission? From the audience side, I request the audience. जिसका chat muted है. From the audience side, if they have any question, they can ask the question, please. Yes, please put forward your question.
Good morning, ma'am. I just wanted a small clarification, ma'am. You've talked about R.
I have used the IMD data as the reference data.
Okay, ma'am. And just one more question, ma'am. This error and bias correction schemes that you talked about, ma'am, is it especially for the SSP products, or is it a general method of error and bias correction?
Yeah, that is a good question. So in this one, it can be applied to any time series. So, for example, if you have any other time series to be compared with any observed data, it can certainly be applied to that. And error decomposition, the way it is decomposed, that using systematic error and the random error, as I mentioned, it actually first originated to analyze the products from these numerical weather models, NWPs. So this method was suggested by Wilmot in 1981. And later in the 2000s, it got adjusted a little bit, modified a little bit, and it is applied in the satellite classification.
Yeah, okay.
In general, the answer to your question is yes, it is applicable to other time series also. If you want to split that into systematic and random mirror and see the characteristics of the error in that series.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Is there any question from the audience side? Please write your question as well in the chat. That can be also addressed. We can wait for a couple of minutes, I think. The participants, please, if you have any question, then please put forward.
I would suggest to all the participants to share your view and discuss with the speaker. It will be good for you.
Yes, sir, definitely.
Or you can write your query in your chat box also. If you have a mic problem or any other issue, you can write your query in a chat box.
Here is a question, ma'am, that is how to handle random error in stochastic modeling will improve error estimation, from Pankaj Kumar Pandey.
How to handle random error in stochastic
Modeling, yeah.
So random error, as we often say, it's an error inherent in the time series, and it does not have any proper structure. So in stochastic modeling also, we assume that these kind of errors cannot be removed. That is, this is a random error, right? So, but then when we how to handle this random error will improve the error estimation. So in the error estimation part, we often put our focus in the systematic error, so that when we put so total error, as I said, is broken up into systematic error and the random error. Random error component most often cannot be reduced. In the mean process, if it gets reduced, if it gets affected, that is something else. But by definition, systematic error is something which we focus on, and then we'll try to reduce by fitting a relationship between these two data sets we are dealing with. And that is also done in the stochastic modeling also.
I hope Pankaj Kumar Pandit got his answer. Any more question? Thank you, ma'am, for answering this question. Yeah. Any more question from the participant side? We can wait for a couple of minutes. Maybe due to internet connection, the things are running a little bit slow, so we can wait.
We have time till 11:30, right?
Yeah, ma'am. So we have another 10 minutes or so.
I hope people got what I just spoke about.
Yeah, obviously, because there are many illustrations there, so it was really good. So I think at least as this field is not from my, I don't belong to this particular field, but still it was understandable for me. So I think as they people are very much acquainted with those terminologies, so they will have got much knowledge from this.
I hope so.
Yeah, ma'am, definitely. Okay, the question from Shishak that he can't find any source online about the traditional hit miss falls precipitation errors.
So, Srishik, there are, I think this PPT is will be available to you in the form of a recording. So you can go to the slides where I have explained this hit miss false error scheme. That scheme was originally proposed by Tian in 2009, and later it is a bit improved by Aga Kaushik and all in 2012. So if you see the fourth reference here, and Tian's reference will come somewhere in the second page. So if you are unable to download that, you can just mail me. I will send as attachment. But these are very widely cited works. So it is available. And Tian's work is published in JGR, Journal of Geophysical Research, and this Aga Kaushik's work is published in, again, GRL, Geophysical Research Letters. So those might be subscribed journals, but you can just mail me in case you want to read those literature.
Okay.
Yeah, next question I can read out is that in hilly region, most of the global rainfall product perform very poorly. Any specific technique you recommend to improve for hilly regions? See, the only technique or possible way we can try is that in hilly region, you can say that the rainfall magnitude is expected to be much higher than the other regions. And if you remember in one of the slide, I have shown that these errors or the components of errors are going to be exhibit a very linear relationship or a direct relationship with the rainfall magnitude. So that information of the rainfall magnitude, and also I have seen some studies using the information of elevation. So if you remember, I have also talked about a bit about how some of the studies have used the additional information from various topographical variables or various terrain information or meteorological information. So some of these information, that is elevation information, if we can inject into these bias correction technique, and that's also been done, that's something, not something new. That is done specifically to correct the bias over these kind of regions where the satellite is known to be performing inferior. We also have done a similar work, but I have not presented it here. So what we did is we tried to relate this error with respect to many variables. For example, the spatial variables, latitude, longitude, and the elevation, of course, and the rainfall magnitude, and even the LULC, land use, land cover. So, and then we tried to come up with whether are there any relationship, not necessarily linear, but it could be non-linear also. We try to come up with this kind of relationship, and wherever we could find some significant relationship, we try to extract that information to the and put it into the bias correction technique, and we did see some improvement. So that is one technique you probably can adopt to improvise these particular products for the hilly regions. And also, to add to that, there are some studies which I have not covered here, which work on, my discussion was mainly on this level 3 product. There are some studies which focus on this level 1 product and level 2 product rather. So there also these kind of reflectance, mainly these errors are caused because of the poor reflectance value. So some studies, very few although, from the core remote sensing area, they have also taken up this level 1 product and tried to play with that. So that also can be tried, but those studies are from purely core remote sensing journals. So I have not covered it here.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am, for the very good explanation. I hope Pankaj got his answer. Any more questions from the audience side? He has further question.
In case of temperature, time-lapse technique work well? Will it also work for rainfall? No, because there is no clear time lapse. For example, the temperature lapse might be 6 degrees Celsius, or as we go up, declination. But that kind of definite lapse rate is not there for rainfall. It does relate to temperature. For example, there is a famous Clausius-Clapeyron theorem which relates rainfall with the temperature. So again, in the bias correction techniques which I have listed, they have used the information captured in the time series. So as you said, for the flat terrain temperature might be low, and for that hilly terrain temperature might be high. So that some information is captured in this temperature series, and they have tried to use this temperature series in the bias correction algorithm. So I have listed those studies also. You can have a look of those methods that could also be used in hilly regions. But all these things are how much effective it is going to be. It cannot be generalized for all the hilly regions, right? So yeah, this slide. So here you can see the second one, Hashemi and others in 2017 considered elevation and temperature. So elevation and temperature is certainly focused on these kind of high terrains only. But then there is no certain lapse rate which can be applied for temperatures, rainfall series. But the lapse rate information, the temperature series can be injected into this bias correction algorithm, and that could be used for this correction of rainfall in the hilly regions. I hope that answers your question.
I hope he is satisfied because he has written. Any more questions from the audience side? One more question is there from Manoj Yadav.
In case of short-term data, can we use precipitation extreme indices as you discussed? Short-term data, you mean, can you explain that, what you mean by short-term data, or data length you are mentioning? Are you mentioning data length? So if you are mentioning the length of the data, we can use precipitation extreme indicators. So often these indicators, yeah, you can use that if that is what you meant by short-term data, 10 to 20 years. Okay, yes, you can use that. That will give you, but normally in hydrology, you know that we often rely on long data like 25 years or 30 years. But then here in satellite, we are restricted with the data set. For example, TRMM is from 98 to 2016, so that is like 19 years of data, maximum 20, not even 20, 18, 19, 17, 18 years of data. And GPM is made available from 2015 onwards, so we have data of last 5 years. So, but then see the resolution of the data. It is 0.5 hourly, half hourly, and the TRMM is 3 hourly. So the number of data sets, the number of data points in that time series is certainly going to be much large, and which is actually going to affect this kind of time series modeling. So yes, 10 to 20 years can be used for this purpose, for the SPPs, because the temporal resolution is high for these data sets. And you will get a fairly good average picture of these extreme indices, how it is varying. But I'm not saying that you can use this data set for any kind of trend analysis. The evolution of those extremes, no, I don't think so. This data set can be used. But then the extremes, we can have we can always extract these extreme indices from this data set. Does it answer your question, Manoj?
I hope.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, then is there any more question from the audience side, because it is going to we are going to get over of this session. So please, if you have any question, then please put forward as soon as possible.
If you have any more question, you can always mail me. My email is dhanya@civil.iitd.ac.in. And if you want any references, please feel free to mail me.
Uh, Thank you so much, ma'am. I hope there is no more question, and if there is a question, they will directly contact you. I mean, email you. So thank you for being with us and giving your precious time with us, and sharing those knowledges, those informations are really nice. Okay, this session will be shared definitely, and please.